Hello, welcome back to Christopher Taylor at Sovereign Harmony. Thanks a lot for watching my videos, sharing my videos, commenting, liking, subscribing, etc. I'm back here just to do a little overview of 2023 as we round out the last couple of days of 2022. Today, you can see up here, it's December 28th. It's about 2 o'clock local time for me. So we got a few days left here of the year, and we are exiting and beginning a year with a few significant things happening. So I want to talk about that as well and do a nice little review of 2022 and what's come out of that. Okay, so here's a picture of the sky right now. As we speak, we can see, for example, Mercury and Venus joining each other. And we can see things like Jupiter freshly into Aries, 0 degrees Aries there. So some things that have happened recently. Also, Mars is retrograde. There's that little R in Gemini. And so some of these things are going to be coming to an end. And so we'll talk about that. So just recently, I mentioned Jupiter entered Aries. That was on the 20th. So about a week ago, Jupiter entered Aries, and that's going to fly through Aries here in the first few months of 2023. So mid-May, May 16th, that is when Jupiter will enter Taurus. And then at that point, it's going to be in Taurus for well over a year. But from now until mid-May, it's going to be pretty much high speed through Aries. And Aries is a very high speed, fiery energy as it is. Jupiter is a very expansive and fiery energy as well. So this is, from that perspective, this is a time when things could be moving pretty fast. Okay, so the first several months of 2023 is all about fast motion. If we're involved in anything entrepreneurial, this is a very good energy for that to be pushing forward. It's also just good for individuation in general. And that's going to come up again later in the year when we talk about the change of signs for the moon's nodes, which are going to move from Taurus, Scorpio to Aries, Libra, which is going to have a lot of that theme of individuation. So coming out of polarity, I think the last several years have done a lot to polarize people. So there's the sense of nuance and discussion or perspective is pretty much gone by the wayside, but we might see a comeback with, in 2023, the combination of Jupiter and Aries the first few months, and also another big change that's going to be happening. We can see Pluto there at 27 degrees Capricorn. Well, that's going to enter Aquarius here in late March, March 23rd. So that will be coming up, and it'll only be in Aquarius for a few months. It'll back into Capricorn again, and it won't reappear into Aquarius until 2024, but it's going to give us a very strong preview of what we can expect. And what Pluto has been doing now at 27 degrees Capricorn, in fact, today, December 28th, is the third and final exact conjunction of Pluto to the United States of America, natal Pluto, from July 4th, 1776. So this is what I've mentioned in previous videos, the Pluto return for the US. And that Pluto return spans the years from 2020 to 2024 in general, and the peak year being 2022. This is what I spoke of about a year ago when I did an overview for 2022. So we are essentially moving through and past the peak of this energy. And as I mentioned before, what that is, it's kind of like the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's destruction, but also rebirth. And so the US has been going through the last few years and continues to go through for the next couple of years, this period of total transformation. So what has been dying on some level and something new being born completely. And what's interesting is a lot of the things that are being uncovered right now. And I'm going to just go over a few of those things. And this has a lot to do with Mars retrograde. My very last video, which I'm not sure when I did that, it must have been in like October, because that was right before Mars turned retrograde. And I mentioned, you can go back and listen to that, that with Gemini having to do with communication, Mars having to do with, high energy, this having a lot to do with things that we thought were true, finding out they're not, things that we thought weren't true, finding out that they are. And this whole sort of can't put our finger on what's actually true because there's so much information comes to us, and then we find out it's not what we initially thought. And so there's lots of examples of that going around if you just watch the news the last couple of months. And so some of those things, for example, probably the best example of how this has been used has been the takeover of Twitter by Elon Musk, right? And so there's many different social media out there, including YouTube, right? But the idea is that it's kind of been under lock and key as far as algorithms and how stories are judged and et cetera, right? You know, what's true, what's not true. And so Mars then turns, you know, retrograde in Gemini. Elon Musk buys Twitter, and then all of a sudden these Twitter files start coming out, and we start seeing like that the FBI has been directly involved in censorship. So FBI being a, you know, a tax-funded organization, and it was, you know, censoring toward one political ideology, right? So in other words, we're all funding for one, you know, one side of a story, which is interesting to know that it has been going on. There's been a lot of suspicion of that, not just with Twitter, but with Facebook and YouTube and other social media. And it doesn't mean that this stuff isn't happening with those other social media, but all we have for evidence is that it is and has been happening with Twitter. So it's really just the tip of an iceberg that this Mars retrograde in Gemini is really exposed here. And so that's just, you know, one track, okay? And then, you know, speaking of three-letter organizations like, you know, CIA, FBI, et cetera, there's also what's coming out, what was supposed to be released actually years ago was the JFK files, right? And now in the last couple of weeks, we've already gotten some inklings of what might be in there. And supposedly they're supposed to release that here in the next couple of weeks. And we got, you know, Mars retrograde until January 12th here. So we got a couple more weeks of that energy. And so it falls right in line with the timing of when we would expect that. So with Mars retrograde, expect to learn a little bit more about JFK. So what we know so far is that Oswald, the one that was, you know, supposedly the lone gunman who was shot, you know, shot dead a day or two later, right after he committed this crime all on his own, that he was working with the CIA a few months prior to that. Now, that doesn't mean that the CIA, you know, he worked for the CIA when he did the shooting. It doesn't not mean it either, but we can't conclude that. But we know he was involved with the CIA. So the idea of the CIA being involved in JFK, you know, again, this is the idea that, oh, we're told that was not true, right? That was not true. We had a whole investigation, and I think it was the Warren Commission or something like that. And oh yeah, it came back, it was a lone gunman. CIA was not involved. Now it opens up the door that it's possible, right? So that's exactly how this Mars in Gemini, you know, retrograde in Gemini works. What we thought was true, we find out might not be true, you know, et cetera. Some other things, in going back to the Twitter files, the Pentagon it was shown that they have been directly involved in PSYOP or psychological operations using Twitter, which is basically using fake accounts to steer public perception and opinion. Again, politically based, well, something that's supposed to be completely objective and, you know, taxpayer funded by all, regardless of their ideologies, et cetera. And so all of this also has to do with the Pluto return, you know, this Pluto return in the US. So this is what's happening in the US. All the dark secrets are coming out, right? You know, what and how the US has abused its power. All of this is coming out essentially right now. The other one being that's coming out of the Twitter files is, you know, involving the FBI is like the Hunter Biden laptop, which again, we were told misinformation about a month or two before the 2020 election. Don't listen to it. Every news station said this is misinformation. Biden himself said that there were, I don't know how many agents that he talked to that said it's all misinformation, et cetera. So it was made pretty clear that that was not something that was worth even investigating. That wasn't true. And now we find out that there is something to look into. So again, that is a whole other can of worms that needs to be looked into. But the idea being that it was used as a way to prevent a bad light on the one specific candidate, Biden. So we have, again, the FBI working for one political ideology and not on behalf of, you know, objectively on behalf of all American taxpayers. Another big thing that's collapsing right now, again, something that's based on untruths that we find out is true, et cetera, is the FTX cryptocurrency collapse. So this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried or whatever his name is, he was hoisted up by financial experts as like the next JP Morgan, you know, the JP Morgan of crypto, this, that. Lots of people had money in there, you know, Tom Brady was one, you know, big example, but like big time celebrities with lots of money putting a lot of money into this cryptocurrency. And then we find out it was really a sham operation. So, and there's still a lot that has to come out with that too. He's been arrested and he's bailed out, and, you know, there's going to be probably some investigation there. But, you know, very possible that that operation wasn't what it was said to be, which was, you know, an investment. It was more of a channeling or a laundry operation potentially. So we'll see how that goes. And that also has to do, because we're talking about, you know, different kinds of money, etc. If you looked at my videos, the last couple of videos, Uranus here in Taurus with the moon's north node. Okay, so they've been kind of hanging out. They were exact in July, but they really have been within a few degrees of each other since then. So Taurus having to do with money and finances, etc. And so this really falls into that category, is this collapse of this non-physical entity known as crypto, right? This big collapse. Okay, it's also having a lot to do with what's happening with the US dollar right now. So again, Pluto return for the US, and we've got countries like Russia teaming up with China, et cetera, to work on other forms of currency that so they can get off of the dollar. So we're kind of on this precipice of the potential loss of the US dollar. So that kind of plays in with the cryptocurrency collapse and the Pluto return in the US as well. Other things before we get into, I just want to go over a lot of things just to show you that, you know, the validity here of this Mars and Gemini, especially, but, you know, as it relates to Pluto and Capricorn, Uranus and the North Node in Taurus, and how it's all playing out right now in front of our faces. So while it was all speculative, when I'm looking out to 2022 or during it, now it's easier in retrospect to see, like, you know, here's how these energies have actually played out, right? So another thing would be the when it comes to the illness and the injections. I don't want to use the words that are going to get me flagged. So, but point being is things like Fauci and the funding for gain of function research. Again, we were told originally that's BS. It's not real. Didn't really happen. Wasn't significant. Now we're coming to find out that this idea of a lab leak, which would be something that would get you completely censored a year ago, now is really a possibility. It's really like something that could, you know, needs to be looked into, et cetera. And also, we're finding out, again, going back to Twitter. So Twitter's opening up a can of worms for social media, because we know Twitter's not acting alone. You have to be pretty naive to think that what we're finding out about Twitter specifically, because we now have someone who is accessing the files to find out that stuff isn't also happening in other social media. But so one big thing is going to be the idea that there were, you know, doctors with, you know, accolades and you know, speaking their opinions, which is all doctors can do, is speak their opinions, who were being blocked during the whole illness, during the whole injections, things that they have to say that are valuable, things about alternative treatments, okay, that were, again, initially we're told that's not good, that's horse medicine, etc. Now we're finding out, well, that they were used effectively by certain doctors in certain countries, etc. And so that stuff is starting to come out too. And again, it was this FBI and Twitter, or social media in general, we should say social media relationship, that was squashing this, making these doctors look like quacks, or that they shouldn't be listened to, when really we should listen to everyone's opinions, not just the sanctioned opinions, right? But the idea being that they were forming a narrative and eliminating the ability for an individual to think for themselves. Okay, so this is all bombshell stuff, and exactly what we would expect when Mars goes retrograde in Gemini. The kind of things that can just come out and just change our whole perception of reality. Anyway, there's a few other examples that we could probably get into, but I think that's going to, you know, give us a good sense of it, so we can talk more about 2023. One last thing I'll mention is going back to the Uranus and the North Node in Taurus. I had mentioned back in before that, probably early summer, when I did a video, that this could indicate some new technology, some birth of a new technology, or an improvement on a current technology when it comes to like energy and resources, because Taurus has to do with these things. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've had well, been in the articles and whatnot, that there's been advances in nuclear fusion, which is the safer form of nuclear, right? Where you're not splitting, you're fusing, and it creates a colder form of energy, so it's not as explosive, etc. And this is the kind of thing that, especially when we're looking at, you know, this time of year when you can get these cold outbreaks and whatnot, and with all the power plants getting shut down for environmental reasons, supposedly, right? This is something that could be extremely valuable for the grid if we were to implement that. So where that goes, who knows? But the idea being that it came out here at this time. How that could play out in 2023 is we have Pluto moving into Aquarius, like I said. So we're getting a preview of it just late March to early June. Pluto will be in Aquarius, Aquarius being ruled by Uranus. So this is that same kind of energy. So it could be that, what comes through in 2022. And now we're going to see this period of several years of implementation, Pluto and Aquarius. So that could be a very positive thing. We might get our first inklings, our first preview of this in 2023, especially in like spring to early summer when Pluto's in Aquarius. But it will, go back to Capricorn, and then in early 2024 it'll be back in Aquarius. And I think it goes back to Capricorn one more time, briefly, and then the next time it goes back into Aquarius, late 2024, 2025, it's going to be there for about 15 years or more, probably a little bit more than 15 years straight, just like it's been in Capricorn since 2008. So Pluto has not left the sign of Capricorn since 2008. So if you put that in perspective, how long that's been, it's been almost 15 years. Pluto has been in Capricorn, and it's been a time of basically corruption or revelation of corruption in government and overreach of power. And we've gotten more and more aware of it. And the last time, again, because we're having the Pluto return, so the last time Pluto was at the degree it's at now was when there was an American Revolution happening. And what followed that during the years of Pluto and Aquarius was the years of putting together the nation now known as the United States. And by the time that Pluto left Aquarius in the late 1790s, this is when the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, they were all formed. So we're in another one of these kind of periods on a global level. If you see what's happening in China, for example, there's a lot of rebellion happening there. You could see the Pluto and Capricorn with the forced lockdowns right now. That's really an expression of that. But what's going to happen when Pluto enters Aquarius in a place like China that has been, like a pressure cooker in the last several years, especially with COVID taking things over the edge? Not like things weren't heading that direction anyway, but now this has served as a perfect excuse for total government control in a place like that. And so how is that going to express itself in a place like China? And in a place like the US, I mean, I think we can imagine this is the first place that was really expressed in that form many, many years ago, but it's a new round coming in. It's a new time, a new birth of freedom, a new wave. And then that could, again, very well have something to do with energy breakthroughs and the implementation of energy breakthroughs and how that changes things, right? Because, you could say all you want on one side that, the oil industry is, they've got a monopoly and yada, yada, yada. But on the other side too, there's all this forced compliance with, environmental regulations that also has a bit of a monopoly on things. And if you could imagine both of these sides who appear to be against each other, really they're aligned against anything that ruins the carbon economy, because you got one side that's reliant on that carbon economy, right? And then the other side that's reliant on demonizing the carbon economy in order to put forth other investments, right, in energy, which realistically just aren't going to work. Like, for example, I live in California, and supposedly, on the books right now is by 2035, I believe there'll be you won't be able to buy a gas powered car anymore. Okay. And 6 days after that was announced, there was an article, there was a heat wave. This was in late summer here, just in 2022. And it was 6 days after announcing that in 13 years, you can't buy a gas powered car. There was suggestions that if you have an electric car, please don't charge it this weekend because it's going to be too much strain on the grid. And so, in one breath, in less than a week, you're saying we are going to go to all electric, but yet, as of right now, we can't even deal with the very small percentage of cars that are electric. So there's something missing there, right? And so, but something like an energy breakthrough, this could be that thing that unites the people against the corruption on either side. So that one corruption, the long-standing monopoly of the oil and gas industry, but also this merging emerging monopoly on, what we call green energy, right? Which assumes that the only way we can get energy is wind and solar, which can't ever really power a grid. But something like nuclear fusion absolutely could. And without the carbon emissions, which eliminates the argument, right? And so this would be the death of a paradigm and a rebirth. And Aquarius has a lot to do with the people. Okay, so Pluto and Aquarius, that's why it was present when the American Revolution was happening, when it was, transitioning from the war to the actual establishment of the paperwork and the documents for what freedom is, and how we would live, and govern ourselves. Okay, and so this same kind of revolution could happen with energy. Just an idea. We don't know. We'll see what happens when Pluto enters Aquarius again between late March and early June, to see what comes up, see what kind of preview it's going to give us for the next 15 years of time, which fits in nicely with the intentions of, rolling everything over to an all-electric vehicle fleet, which could absolutely work, assuming you have nuclear fusion. But the powers and interests that be that, are obviously aren't interested in that, because the story is too quiet. It's not something that anyone in power is going to benefit from until they can find a way to benefit from it. Okay, and so that's why it's kept under wraps. All right. So anyway, moving on. So that's just a great intro from, the end of 2022 and what's happening and how things are evolving into 2023. So just to get specific, so that, like I said, Mars is going to turn direct January 12th. So this whole period of the information kind of going through different waves of what's true and what's not true, it'll finally settle out. We'll have a better idea of what is true, what we can move forward with. But it will still be in Gemini until about the time Pluto enters Aquarius, actually in about late March. So I believe that is going to be, yeah. So Pluto enters Aquarius on March 23rd, and 2 days later, that's when Mars enters Cancer finally. So the theme of Mars in Gemini, so this like moving information is still with us for another few months until late March. And it may well be that, by the time things iron themselves out, that times up well with Pluto entering Aquarius, and what that means on the collective, again, the people and the transformation of power, with the people, etc. And it could have a lot to do with what comes out and what is coming out as we speak, and what will continue to come out. We also have Mercury about to go retrograde. So I find it interesting. So where's Mercury? Right there. So Mercury is sitting at about 24 degrees Capricorn, and tomorrow, actually tonight, overnight tonight, so on early hours of December 29th, so that's just hours away, it turns retrograde. Okay, and it's going to go back to about 8 degrees Capricorn, and it'll turn direct on January 18th. So the next few weeks, we got ourselves a Mercury retrograde. So we're going to start 2023 in the midst of a Mercury retrograde. What's interesting is that when we get to the end of the year, so as we exit 2023 into 2024, we will also be in a Mercury retrograde. So that combined, the idea that we're starting and ending this calendar year in a Mercury retrograde, combined with this movement of Pluto into Aquarius, so it only changes signs once every 15 years or so. So this suggests a year of major changes. Okay, major changes and transformations, and then we combine that with Jupiter flying through Aries the first 4 or 5 months of the year, and so it gives us a sense of the pace of the year, and in other words, things aren't going to be slowing down anytime soon. Okay, so we got things kind of happening fast, reactions to things that come out, responding right away. Okay, so think about it. January 12th, Mars goes direct. Then January 18th, Mercury goes direct. Then Uranus goes direct a couple days after that. So there's a sense that things kind of start slow the first couple of weeks, and then they kick into gear as we hit the second half of January. And that'll stay true all the way into May, when Jupiter finally enters Taurus. Okay, and again, that'll be about May 16th. Okay, but between now and then, it can get pretty fast between late January, say, and in early May. In early March, Saturn, which has been in Aquarius for a couple of years, um, it's going to actually move into Pisces. And when it moves into Pisces, it's not going to move back to Aquarius again. So that's going to be March 7th. So for the first couple months of 2023, we still have Saturn in Aquarius. And it's interesting to me is that that moves out of Aquarius just a couple weeks before Pluto enters Aquarius. And so I think of it as Saturn kind of priming that energy, priming the power of the people in a more subdued fashion. Saturn is more subdued. Okay, so there's a sense of restructuring collective perception. And then when Pluto comes in, it's like the time is now, essentially. And even, it's only going to be a few months of Pluto in Aquarius, so it's a preview, but we can imagine what 23 is going to tell us about what's coming down the line between the mid 2020s and the late 2030s. During that time that Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, and what kind of things are going to die and be reborn. How will the collective rebel in a sense, and recreate the new out of what falls apart. Okay, so Saturn enters Pisces again early March, and it's going to be in Pisces the rest of 2023 and all the way through 2024, actually. And so this is it's a time of really just getting realistic about our dreams. So Pisces has a lot to do with our dreams, our visions, etc. So it's about taking practical action toward that. And so on a collective level, that's really any fantasies or lies, right? That's Pisces also deals with deception and lies. Anything that in the untangible realm, it's about getting down to reality. Okay, so similar to Mars and Gemini stirring up information, making us question what's true. This is like in response to that, this will be just as Mars is about to exit Gemini in March, and now we got Saturn entering Pisces. So it's sort of like based on all we've just been exposed to, and now that we know what's true and isn't, how do we now practically apply our lives or live our lives knowing what we now know, right? And that's going to be a big theme of most of 2023 into 2024, is not screwing around anymore. It's the idea of like not being naive anymore, and wanting to see the receipts, right? That's a very Saturn thing to do. I want to see the receipts. I don't want to just hear about hope and pipe dreams from a politician, for example. But what is the concrete action? What is the concrete involvement? What are the concrete results that we get out of certain actions? And that's really what that's going to focus on. In addition to that, in mid-March, Jupiter is actually going to join Chiron. Chiron's right here, and that's Jupiter. So Jupiter just entered Aries, like we said, and it's going to move pretty fast. So it's going to catch up to Chiron here in mid-March. And so that is a time of, again, this theme of individuation. Okay, so again, we've been forced to kind of polarize and pick a side on almost every topic, right? And in reality, a nuance is more aligned with reality than any kind of polarity. And what this energy has to do with is, again, it's happening at a time where we're finishing up with Mars and Gemini. Saturn's about to enter Pisces. So we've been exposed at this point to lots of information, things that have changed our perception. So things that we thought were true, now we're starting to see evidence that it isn't. Okay, and that's really the key. And that's where that Saturn and Pisces comes in. It's that evidence. Like, what's the evidence of your theory? Because Pisces is very theoretical and non-physical. What is the evidence of that theory? And so now Jupiter Chiron is this sort of like pulse of confidence in our own individual ability to discern information, right? And so March is a big time of just standing in your own power, standing in your own authority, and allowing your eyes and ears to tell you what is real, and not just what you're told. Just not just shutting your eyes and ears and just doing what you're told or believing what you're told, but really allowing ourselves to determine that. So whether that has to do with like we talked about, all this information dealing with the FBI involvement in social media, et cetera, and how that has formed our perceptions, or our perceptions of the illness and the injections, and things that we're supposed to believe were fringe ideas. like maybe the evidence is what it is, and we have to change our ideas about that. And so I feel like a lot of trust in the media is going to be completely eroded in 2023. It's eroding as we speak. You got organizations like CNN laying off almost everybody that's been a huge part of their organization, and because they're losing ratings. So that's your evidence of eroding confidence in the media. And so independent media then is going to be taking off quite a bit, and that's a big part of this Jupiter Chiron. So as a result of all this information coming out, and this result of wanting the receipts now, we don't want to just hear what the story is. We want to see the proof of the story, right? Because that Pisces is that story, and that's what we get from the media, is a story. And so Saturn moving into Pisces makes it harder to BS people. And Jupiter Chiron is just going to be that sense of, well, my eyes and ears, that's my, my senses, what I see in front of my face, that is what is real. And the evidence is the best thing for, determining what is real. Okay. And so this is real transition here. And that's, again, goes along with Pluto into Aquarius. So we might get this preview of like people just being fed up with the overreach of authority that has been true here for Pluto and Capricorn these last, decade and a half. And this demanding honesty, demanding truth, demanding that we get to know what's actually going on. And I mentioned the JFK files and whatnot. Maybe something huge comes out with that, and it's like, what the, so what else is true that we're supposed to believe wasn't true, right? And so we don't know what's going to come out of that, but everything's kind of building to a crescendo here right now, even if we're not quite aware of it. But as we move into the first couple of months of 2023, especially this March is like a shifting period, as again, Mars exits Gemini, Saturn enters Pisces, and Pluto enters Aquarius, along with Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Aries. So March is like a shifting point that happens pretty strongly. Okay. That sums up kind of the first third or fourth of the year. As we get into April, May, now we're getting into the eclipse season, right? So we get a couple of periods of eclipses every year, and the eclipses that are going to happen, it's the first eclipse will be April 20th, and that's going to be at 29 degrees Aries, so a very important degree. So Aries right here, so we'll have a solar eclipse right at 29 degrees Aries, and that really signifies an ending. When you get 29 degrees, it's the last degree of that sign. So it's a critical degree. Okay. And then that will be followed the next day on April 21st with Mercury turning retrograde again. So we got the Mercury retrograde starting here tomorrow and ending on January 18th. But then as you get into late April, so April 20th, solar eclipse at 29 degrees Aries. And then that'll be followed by Mercury turning retrograde at about 15 degrees Taurus, which I find interesting that Mercury will turn retrograde at 15 degrees Taurus, because when Uranus turns direct here on January 22nd, I believe it is, yeah, January 22nd, it's going to be at 15 degrees Taurus. And so the same degree that Uranus turns direct in late January, 3 months later in late April, that is when Mercury turns retrograde. Okay, so that 15 degrees Taurus is going to be an important degree. We're going to see that theme come up one more time here in 2023. So pay attention to that. And then May 1st, so in the middle of the eclipses and during that Mercury retrograde, that is when Pluto will turn retrograde at 0 degrees Aquarius. So it's not going to get very far into Aquarius. It's going to barely get in there for, from March 23rd to May 1st, it's direct, but it's never past the first degree of Aquarius. And then it's going to turn retrograde May 1st. It's going to eventually make its way back to Capricorn, like we said, in late June. Then we have the lunar eclipse on May 5th. So in early May, we've got this lunar eclipse about halfway through Scorpio. And then that's followed about a week later with Mercury, turning direct at 5 degrees Taurus. And that'll be May 14th. So this late April to mid-May is like now another kind of themed area. So we have the whole first few months of the year where we're still kind of finishing up 2022, really the energies of 2022. And then that transition happens in March, and that's followed up right away by April, May eclipses and that Mercury retrograde. And then in mid-May, right after that, Mercury turns direct. That is when Jupiter is going to enter Taurus. And when it enters Taurus, it'll be in Taurus the rest of the year and well into 2024 as well. And that will actually later in the year, when it turns retrograde, it is going to be turning retrograde at that 15 degrees Taurus. So that's where I said that that's going to come up again, and that's September 4th. But so we have, if you just for that 15 degrees Taurus, just to keep that all in line, the first thing we have is Uranus, which is at 15 degrees Taurus right now. It's pretty much stationary. On January 22nd, it goes direct. And then April 21st, we have Mercury turning retrograde on that point. And then on September 4th, we have Jupiter, which will make its way that far on September 4th, and it's going to turn retrograde. So 15 degrees Taurus, if you have that in your chart, or if you have 15 degrees Scorpio, or 15 degrees Aquarius or Leo, most especially, this is going to be a significant for you this year, because a lot of things are going to be happening, pivoting on that area of your chart. See, as we move along, so with Jupiter in Taurus, then at that point, around June 1st, it will connect with the moon's node. So the moon's node is right here. That's going to backtrack itself. It moves backwards in the zodiac. So it's going to backtrack to about 3 degrees Taurus. Jupiter's going to meet up with it right there. And that's going to be June 1st. And so to me, this really brings back up this theme of the Uranus conjunct North Node. Okay, and so this has to do with that collapse of the currency, cryptocurrency, the petrodollar. Also has to do with the potential new inventions, having to do with energy, etc. And so that happens while Pluto is still in Aquarius, which I find interesting as well. Because we mentioned that, how that relates to the potential revolution in energy, for example. Then about a week later, after that, that's when Pluto dips back into Capricorn. So this is going to be Pluto's last-ditch effort. So this last-ditch effort for government overreach and implementing lots of control over citizens on a global-wide basis. It's kind of like this last shot, because when Pluto enters Aquarius for good, it's going to be tough to do that again. Then Saturn goes retrograde at about 7 degrees Pisces. So it's going to make it about that far. There's Saturn there. It's going to make it about this far into Pisces. And mid-June, that's going to go retrograde. Okay. And as it happens, so right around that time in mid-June, it's going to be in a sextile to Jupiter, which will now, again, move its way to Taurus. So we'll have Jupiter in Taurus sextiling Saturn in Pisces. And so that's going to be starting in late June, but it's actually going to linger until early 2024. And so this has a lot to do with bridging the gap between the intangible and the tangible. Okay, and it's Jupiter and Saturn. So we're talking about expansion and contraction at the same time, which is really just strategic growth, if you want to put it that way. When you really have healthy balance between Saturn and Jupiter, it's strategic growth, it's purposeful growth, it's deliberate growth, right? And that energy is with us late June all the way into probably early February of 2024. And that's related to this idea, again, of wanting to see the receipts, not wanting to believe the rhetoric without proof, combined with this expansion of potential, energy, or, when it comes to money, like maybe newer forms that are more stable. So stabilizing our, finances, etc. So that becomes a big theme then for the second half of 2023 into early 2024. All right. Then we have, when we get to like midsummer, mid-July, that is when the nodes, which I mentioned right here, that is when that's going to back up enough that it changes signs. And I mentioned that a little earlier when I first got on here, that this is going to amplify that theme that this Jupiter-Chiron conjunction in March, it really has to do with, which is individuation, right? So as the North Node moves into Aries, that means the South Node is going to be moved backing into Libra. So it's really a time period for a couple of years where on a collective level, we are getting away from codependence and toward our own independent individuation, our own ability to discern and not have to have agreement with other people to feel that we're worthy of, you know, living as who we are. So it's really, again, it's coming into this because of what's happening now, because of information that's coming up that we were told was fake, but now we've had to find out that it's real. And it's like, so if they told us it was fake, who told us that and why? And what were the intentions? And so this mistrust is really emerging right now. And what that does, it creates a vacuum. And what fills that vacuum is, you know, trust in yourself. And so that really is gonna expand as we move from the second half of 2023, right in through all the way through 2025, when the nodes will be in Aries and Libra. And then we have, as we get into late July, so we start the year with a Mars retrograde, as you said, and that happens about once every couple of years. You don't get a Mars retrograde every year, and you don't get a Venus retrograde every year either. But when we get into late July, Venus is at that point is going to have made its way all the way here into Leo. And so Venus is going to be at about 22 degrees Leo. Yeah, no, 28 degrees Leo, sorry. 28 degrees Leo on July 22nd. And that's when it goes retrograde. And it retrogrades about 40 days or so. And then it will turn direct again. So it'll be from July 22nd to September 3rd. And so it's going to retrograde from 28 degrees back to 12 degrees and then back again. So really the period of June to October is going to be that shadow period where Venus is in this area. So if this part of your chart here in mid to late Leo, that's going to be strongly affected by the Venus retrograde. And, you know, Leo has a lot to do with like leadership, okay, courage, leadership. And so, you know, we may find some shifts on a collective as far as like what our perceptions of who is a good leader versus a bad leader, right? What our image is. And that's really, Leo has a lot to do with image as well. And so does like the planet Venus itself. So Venus in Libra, Leo, sorry, is very much about, when it's retrograding, it's very much about a reorientation of image, okay? And especially in the position of leadership. So we'll see what happens there. So that's, again, late July to early September, when there could be a shift in public perception of specific leaders, okay? And on a personal level, again, you can look at where that is on in your chart to see what part of your chart is activated at that point. Also, in the midst of that Venus retrograde, we'll have another Mercury retrograde. And so starting August 23rd, Mercury at that time is going to be about 23 degrees Virgo. And so from August 23rd to September 15th, so it'll turn retrograde about a month after Venus turns retrograde. And then it will turn direct about a week and a half after Venus turns direct. So they're going to overlap with each other, this Venus retrograde, Mars retrograde. And Mercury is going to be in this zone, Venus is going to be in this zone. Okay, so look at where in your chart that is. That's going to be important. And I'm going to touch, you know, back on these periods throughout the year. I'll come back every couple months to really focus on, you know, where we're at. But this is just a big overview of the 10,000 foot view of 2023. And this is probably going to be a little bit longer than I typically do, but it's going to have everything in it. And then we'll break it down into pieces as we move through the year. So that's taking us into the fall now. And, you know, Mercury goes direct, like I said, September 15th, that's at 8 degrees Virgo. So right here. And so again, that zone is where the Mercury retrograde, you know, from late August to mid-September is going to occur. Pluto then goes direct October 10th, and it's going to be right, you know, within a degree. Again, it's going to be right out here, 27 degrees Capricorn. So even though 2022 is the peak year of this Pluto return for the US, when Pluto turns direct on October 10th, it's basically its final pass, like the final time it's going to be within 1 degree orb of the US Pluto return. So all has to do again with this final chance to uncover the secrets, to on the other side of it, to keep people oppressed and down and not informed, so that, you know, power plays can happen, etc. And so we can watch out for that next fall. And also in October 14th and 28th, that'll be the next round of eclipses. So we'll have a solar eclipse on October 14th, and that is going to be at 21 degrees Libra, so right about here. Okay, and then we're going to have a lunar eclipse on October 28th at 5 degrees Taurus. And that's going to be fairly close to Jupiter in Taurus at that point. but we'll get more into more detail on that later. But this is part of that transition. So we're transitioning again from eclipses that have been occurring in Scorpio and Taurus over the last couple of years to eclipses occurring now in Libra and Aries. So this is going to be one of those transition times, because that October 14th eclipse that's in Libra, so that's the new, the shift into the new energy, and the eclipse on October 28th, the lunar eclipse, is going to be in Taurus. So that's moving away from that old. Okay, then Saturn turns direct November 4th, and that's going to be right at 0 degrees Pisces. So like I said, when Saturn enters Pisces on March 7th, that's it. It's going to be in Pisces for a couple, 2 to 3 years. It's not coming back to Aquarius. It's going to kind of leave Aquarius behind and let Pluto enter it 2 weeks later to see how, get its feet wet in Aquarius before it moves away and doesn't come back until early 2024. So Saturn's going to turn direct in Pisces November 4th, right there at 0 degrees, and then it's going to make its move through Pisces as we enter 2024 and beyond. And then after that, like I said, we end 2023 the same way we started, which is in a Mercury retrograde. So we'll have our final Mercury retrograde, which will be December 13th, and that's going to be in Capricorn, about 8 degrees Capricorn. That is when it's going to turn retrograde, and then it turns direct about 22 degrees Sagittarius, actually on New Year's Day 2024. So technically, as the year expires, it'll still be in retrograde. It'll be roughly stationary, but it'll technically be retrograde and not direct. So anyway, that sums up the year of 2023, just whipping through, and also gives you a sense of how 2022 is transitioning into 2023, and how the first few months, especially of 2023, we're really just having our hangover from 2022, and very big changes happening, especially with this Pluto entering Aquarius for the first time since the early 1790s, right? So we're going to see how that works, not only in the US, but also worldwide. Like I said, I feel like China is a big, it's ready to explode in a lot of ways. And what's been happening with Pluto and Capricorn since 2008 there, it was a cherry on top with the lockdowns. And what, the human spirit is what it is, and it can only take so much. And so that's a pressure cooker waiting to go off. In any case, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. You can always comment below in YouTube. I like the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you have not yet. Also, be sure to share with anyone that you think might use this. As far as your own personal chart goes, you can always contact me as well. We can set something up via Zoom, and we can go over your chart for any of these specific configurations, where they land for you, the eclipses, the retrogrades, whatever it is, and we can explain how it applies to you specifically. So with that, Happy New Year, happy 2023. I'm Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony, and we're signing off. Have a great year. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing.